3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, meeting with the principal NBC executives. I'm happy to report that these meetings more than confirm the good feelings I had about NBC before I came here. This is a first-class organization of talented, energetic, and dedicated professionals, the best executives in broadcasting today. There's no doubt in my mind that this is the team that will be taking NBC to the preeminent position in broadcasting. I must stress the word team, for this is not going to be a one-man show, no matter what you've read. It's going to be a group of well-organized people working very hard toward common creative and business goals. I expect to set the objectives and priorities, and then give the people in charge the necessary authority and support to get their jobs done quickly and effectively. Let me emphasize that the teamwork between NBC and its affiliates will be just as important. If we're to be successful here, and we will be, we must do it together. It is impossible for me to overstate the importance of our affiliates to the success of NBC. Fortunately, NBC is affiliated with the finest stations in the country, and as I join the company, I'm going to do everything possible to see that you remain the finest stations in the country and that I earn your confidence and trust. I will be making a speech next week at the Television Affiliates Conference, and I don't want to give that speech here, particularly after only a day and a weekend on the job. I do want to tell you, however, in some general terms, some of the things you can expect from me. You can expect that as we strive to improve our competitive position, we'll be very conscious of how we do it. I want NBC not only to be the audience leader, but also the most respected network. We will build on the best of NBC's traditions with a spirit of innovation and a dedication to responsibility. In every area of the broadcast operation, we're going to seek programs that pioneer new forms, new ideas, new production techniques, programs with style, and programs that we and you can present with pride. We're not going to follow anyone, we're going to lead. We will have a genuine commitment to quality and responsibility because we recognize the importance of broadcasting in this country, the reliance that people place on it, and the obligation that places on us. To continue earning the public trust, we must particularly focus on news and information and never allow its importance to be diminished because our audience depends on it and because it will help keep our medium strong for the challenges it will meet in the years ahead. But make no mistake about it, broadcasting is and will continue to be a central institution in American life. We in the NBC family must do our part, and that means redefining leadership to mean more than competitive success. It also must mean, in every area of our broadcast service, helping society understand its problems and meet its challenges. This is an exciting time to be a broadcaster, and I look forward to working with you for a long time to come. I hope to see many of you next week in New York. Till then, goodbye.
This is fantastic. Quite a facility. I don't believe I've ever seen anything to equal it. This is fantastic. No, we just wanted to see some fast pitch tournament ball in Montgomery 25 years ago of some magnitude, and it turned out much better than we expected the first year. I remember very well the final game was not a pitcher's duel. It was a 12-11 game, and our local Gunner Air Force team was the winning team in the first league, and it was held at Gunner Air Force Base. And we played an 18 double elimination tournament, which consisted of 15 ball games on one field in 2 days, one evening and one whole day. So it's quite a difference, yes, indeed.
It is being called the hidden crime, the assaults on women by their husbands. Battered women in this country increase daily. Here in Montgomery, there's something being done to curb it and to help both the battered women and their husbands. Nationwide police statistics show that most officers are killed in the line of duty when they answer domestic calls where women are being beaten by their husbands. In a series of interviews, we learned that there are some solutions to the problem, but they are not simple.
Wife battery has been discovered at every economic and educational level. Just as the frequency of rape alarmed our society, so has wife beating. Montgomery County Assistant District Attorney Ellen Brooks has tried several cases of wife abuse and says it is a serious problem in this community.
We have seen across the nation, as well as in Alabama recently, a trend to finding a woman not guilty if she should murder or assault a man who has been attacking her. For instance, in Montgomery County, just last month, the grand jury here no-billed a case in which a woman claimed that she shot her common-law husband in self-defense, and the grand jury went along with that and no-billed that case. So in that case, we saw a death result from a battered wife.
Okay, now, why do you think the grand jury no-billed the case?
Well, I think for a long time we've had an unwritten law that says a man who finds his wife or his girlfriend in a certain situation with another man, there's an unwritten law that that's okay if he attacks her or the other man. And for a first time we are seeing that happen now in trials with juries, finding the opposite to be true. If a woman is beaten and in retaliation and just out of passion she attacks the attacker. And so for the first time the opposite is happening.
In this specific case, was it found that she had received repeated beatings from this man?
Yes, and in this particular case, the alleged defendant went to the hospital and was examined, and the doctors there found that she had been stomped about the head. Her beating, in other words, was very severe, and it happened at the time that she shot him.
Would this be a typical situation in the city of Montgomery?
I hate to say use the word typical, but it happens more often than we think, and I think we're going to see more of it when women realize that they just can't go on taking it.
29-year-old Darlene Riley is divorced now after a 5.5-year marriage. During that union, twins were born. She says there were also many beatings.
I think most of the abuse began about the second year that we were married. And he spent a lot of time out with his friends at night. And he would come in and expect to have his breakfast cooked if he was out that late. If I were working on the bills, and would try to talk to him about the financial situation, and he didn't want to hear about it. He'd become very quiet and very moody, and if I kept persisting, it would turn into a fight.
Would you nag him, or would you?
Yes.
You would nag him?
Yes. If you, very persistently, yes. And I would say you'd call it nagging. A lot of the problem was lack of communication. I couldn't get him to talk to me. He was always very quiet.
When he was home?
When he was home, yes.
Okay. How long were you married before your husband started beating you?
About a year. The first year was pretty good. He was out a lot the first year, but I didn't say very much about it. But towards the second year, I had gotten some ideas about where I wanted our relationship to go and financially where we needed to go, because he didn't work very much the first year, and I was the sole support of the family. And we didn't have any children at that time, but we had talked about having a family, and we needed to be financially solvent before we could. And as I said before, trying to get in financial shape always led to a lot of fights. His being out all the time, at night led to a lot of fights.
At least 2 major public opinion polls have found that official actions against wife beaters increased substantially with the new awareness of the serious results of wife beating. Mental health official Mary Kostopian.
The first entry point for battered women is usually through our Help a Crisis program. That's a 24-hour telephone counseling service, and people can call us and without divulging their person to us, and we feel that that's probably why they contact us first in that manner. At this point, the women receive some initial counseling, some limited legal and medical advice regarding their situation and are generally encouraged to come into our facility, which, as you know, is a community mental health center. These women then are given some counseling, some psychological counseling, but it's limited at best because we're only dealing with maybe half the problem. The real problem is usually with the person who is battering the woman.
In our next report, we will look at a community-based organization designed to provide shelters and psychological counseling for battered women and their husbands. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
In most communities, social service groups have formed to help battered women like Darlene Riley. But limited funds and the lack of interest by the community as a whole makes the effort extremely difficult. Alabama State University professor Carolyn Thomas is spearheading such an effort in this area.
There is never a single cause. There are many causes. I'll mention a few that I have found and read about in books. One cause is just absolute frustration. The man or the woman, whoever is the abuser, is having a real hard time at work with their other relationships, and they come home and for no reason they may aggressively take their bad situation out on their spouse. They're very, very frustrated. I think those people can be helped. Another cause is the inability to resolve conflict. I think that can be helped a whole lot with teaching people how to communicate and resolve conflict in some other more appropriate way rather than fighting it out. I find more and more today, and a lot of people report this, that people just don't know how to relate and they don't know how to communicate. Another reason is socialization of males into thinking that they have the right to discipline theirs, meaning their children or their wives. We've heard a whole lot about how wives should be obedient to their husbands. A lot of people take this with a grain of salt, but some people take it so seriously that if a woman does something that even slightly displeases the man, that he has the right to discipline her and his children to an extent that may be very dangerous to their lives. Some people think that alcohol and drugs have something to do with it. I found, for instance, that the Ministerial Alliance here is well aware of the fact that alcohol is not the cause of wife abuse, that it is frequently a contributing factor, but it is not a cause. I think you could mention a lot of other causes, but the main ones I find are frustration, the inability to communicate and relate and resolve conflict, and socialization into thinking you have power over people and that you can abuse them until you get them to do what you want them to. I find those to be the most prevalent causes. Sometimes all three of them will be present, sometimes just one of them. Sometimes I find isolated causes.
The story Darlene Riley tells mirrors the horrible experiences of other women in this and other cities across the country.
He would always hit me on the head and on the back, places that would not show. And I would feel drained after he would do it, and when he would hit me on the head, it was like he just knocked the sense out of me, and for a couple of days I couldn't do anything. I felt very limp and just very powerless.
Did you ever fight him back?
Oh, yes. I certainly did. And then he would restrain me. He would take me into the bedroom, and he would put me in the bed, and he would sit on me and hold me until I stopped being hysterical, which made it even worse for me.
Why did you stay?
I felt like I couldn't leave. I also felt very guilty about the whole thing. I felt like, what was I doing wrong? Maybe I wasn't a good enough cook, or maybe I didn't keep house well enough. At one time I even thought, well, maybe if I learned how to sew and enjoyed staying at home, but I wanted to work, I wanted to go to school, things like that, and he wanted me to work so he would have the money, but when I would mention things like, going to school or going on trips with friends, he was very opposed to that.
What contributed to your decision to get a divorce?
I think that I had come to value my independence, and I finally felt like I could make it on my own, and I felt like I had to get away from him. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't want to be treated like that. I got tired of sitting home night after night by myself, weekends by myself, always by myself. I didn't think that's what a marriage ought to be. You know, I didn't have a relationship. I didn't have any communication, and I didn't feel like I had anybody who really cared whether I lived or died. I was there, you know, to serve his purposes, to cook his meals and keep his, you know, house and take care of his kids. And that was all.
And take his beatings?
I guess so.
You did take them?
I did.
Psychologists and mental health technicians who've been working on the battered wives problem say that understanding the true and hidden dimension of the problem is the first step toward understanding it and what you and I can do to solve it. They say that most of us seem to think that the women we know, the married women, don't have this situation. Sophisticated and wealthy people don't suffer from the battered wife syndrome. But psychologists and health technicians say this is not true. They say that you only have to look around and you can spot the symptoms. They say until we wake up and realize that we have an epidemic of wife beating amongst us, the problem will never be solved. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News, reporting.
Each month over the past 2 years, the Department of Public Safety has received around 2,000 notices concerning drivers who fail to settle traffic cases. Since tracking down these individuals is a time and cost-consuming operation, officials are trying something new. Now, if an individual skips an appearance in court to settle a violation, that motorist won't get a new license when renewal time comes around.
In case a person gets a ticket in the state or out of the state for that matter, and he fails to settle that case, then when it comes time for him to renew his driver's license, if there's any outstanding cases in the courts across the state or even out of state that have not been settled, then his driver's license will not be renewed until this case is settled or cases is settled, whichever the case may be, and also until he pays a $25 reinstatement fee.
Is this something easily done by troopers to find out if you haven't paid your license?
Yes, it's a matter of simply checking through the state computer system. Even though a person has a driver's license in hand, he could still be suspended or revoked. And of course, when each officer checks this as he makes that arrest there or makes a stop, just a routine driver's license check, it's a matter simply of giving this number to the computer, and he would have a report back immediately as to whether or not this person's driver's license was valid.
This new method of encouragement is beginning to show some results. Each month, hundreds of drivers are losing their licenses because they don't show up in court. But officials hope that this number will soon decline as more people realize the importance of paying up. Bill Weaver, WSFA TV News.
Well, I had a lot of control trouble, and when a pitcher has control trouble and he's throwing a lot of pitches, the infielders and outfielders sort of get back on their heels, and it affects their fielding. That's why my support wasn't as good last night as it has been when I pitch a good ball game. But I'd say it was all my fault.
Overall, though, this year you seem to be pitching a lot better than you were, let's say, last season when you tried out with the Knoxville Sox. What's the knuckleball doing this year that it wasn't last year?
What it's supposed to do, which is jump around, and last year it wasn't even jumping around. Now it's jumping around so much I can't control it. Last year it wasn't jumping around at all. And last year, I hadn't played ball professionally for all, 7 years, so it took me most of last summer to get back in the groove and get the ball feeling right in my hand, build up my arm. So I figured to be better this year, and if I'm back here again next year, I'll probably be 6-0 by this time.
What made you decide to go to that particular pitch, the knuckleball?
Well, it's the only pitch that a 39-year-old man could throw who's been out of the game for 7 years and still get by, and the other pitches require too much muscle that you'd have to build up over a long period of years. A knuckleball is not a pitch that requires any strength. It's just a skill pitch, and you master the skill and you've got it. And it's a pitch I've thrown since I was 12 years old, so it wasn't a matter I had to learn this new pitch. I'm simply relearning a pitch I already knew how to throw a long time ago.
When you started thinking about coronary bypasses, when you started thinking about revolutionizing this type of surgical procedure, did you have any idea it would lead to what it is today?
No. No, and at the time that you're working on some particular problem, trying to develop a means of solving that problem, I don't think you think about the consequences or the impact or anything of that sort. You think you're now concentrating on trying to find the best means of dealing with the problem. The fact that it may later prove to be very popular or useful and so on, I think is very gratifying later on when you find that out. But at that time, I think most people, like myself, aren't concerned with what the effect of it is. They're concerned with the problem as they see it. And of course, sometimes we're working on problems that don't have any effect at all, and yet they may be relatively small problem to others, but while we're working on them, they're big problems because we haven't solved them, you see. So I think it's the gratification comes in the solution to any problem, whatever it may be.
What goes through your mind when you begin an operation like this?
Well, I'm usually thinking about that particular patient, and I'm concerned with him and with what I should do, and I'm following every aspect and step of the procedure, and the concentration of the surgeon, not only myself, but of any surgeon, in an operating room with the particular case he's doing is so great that he doesn't really think about anything else. It's not possible, you know, to have the mind wander off and daydream when you're doing something that requires a tremendous amount of concentration.
How would you compare your first big operation, if you will, for lack of a better word, to an operation that you performed dozens of times since? How would you compare the first one with the most recent one that you've done?
Well, I would say that the most recent ones are relatively simple in terms of the technical aspects of it, not only because we've learned to do it better, but also because with time and with more experience, we develop a simpler way of doing it. That's the improvement we make, and we learn that from experience. The other thing, of course, is that it's far safer now than it was when we first started.
For several years, I think the general public was led to believe that heart transplants perhaps would be an answer to many coronary problems. Is that the case now, and why has this...
I don't quite know why the public was led to believe that, because certainly the medical profession and the scientists never believed that.
Perhaps they wanted to believe that.
Yeah, I think it was a kind of misleading application of what might be called an interesting news story. There's no question about it being, you know, an interesting news story, but because of its interest, and let's say its expansion as a news story, doesn't mean that it had great impact in terms of the problem of heart disease. You've got to keep in mind that there are literally millions of people in this country who suffer from some form of heart disease, and over 1 million that die from cardiovascular disease or heart and blood vessel disease every year. Heart transplants couldn't possibly take care of that kind of a problem, if for no other reason than the fact that you just don't have donors to that extent. I mean, a donor is a very special accident that kills the brain of the individual but doesn't damage the heart. So, and it's got to be a young, healthy person. So it may have very limited application, but it can't possibly have any great impact on heart disease.
I love freestyle better than, I wrestled Greco before I wrestled collegiate if it was a choice. But freestyle to me is more exciting. You can see a lot of throws, a lot of good moving, steady pace. Where collegiate, it just kind of tends to slow down, like second and third period when the guy is down, he either get rolling out or he's just trying to escape. There's no excitement in it.
What's the big difference between freestyle and collegiate wrestling?
Both of them is 3 periods long, but the difference is second and third period where a guy either start up or start down in collegiate style, where in freestyle you're on your feet all 3 periods. And the scoring is just a little bit different. You get 1 point for a takedown, where in collegiate you get 2 points for a takedown. Just minor rules.
Overall, though, this year you seem to be pitching a lot better than you were, let's say, last season when you tried out with the Knoxville Sox. What's the knuckleball doing this year that it wasn't last year?
What it's supposed to do, which is jump around, and last year it wasn't even jumping around. Now it's jumping around so much I can't control it. Last year it wasn't jumping around at all. And last year, I hadn't played ball professionally for all, 7 years, so it took me most of last summer to get back in the groove and get the ball feeling right in my hand, build up my arm. So I figured to be better this year, and if I'm back here again next year, I'll probably be 6-0 by this time.
What made you decide to go to that particular pitch, the knuckleball?
Well, it's the only pitch that a 39-year-old man could throw who's been out of the game for 7 years. And still get by, and the other pitches require too much muscle that you'd have to build up over a long period of years. A knuckleball is not a pitch that requires any strength. It's just a skill pitch, and you master the skill and you've got it. And it's a pitch I've thrown since I was 12 years old, so it wasn't a matter of I had to learn this new pitch. I'm simply relearning a pitch I already knew how to throw a long time ago.
Okay, what about the rest of the team members? How are they accepting your position on the club?
Well, they were a little bit resentful at first. They felt that, an old guy shouldn't take the spot of some young rookie, but I think they see how I play the game and they come to respect how hard I worked. And I think they're starting to realize now that opportunities aren't given to you, you have to earn them. And also I think they realize that maybe 20% of these kids are going to make it to the big leagues, no more. Yeah. And I'm certainly not going to replace one of those 20%. I'm going to replace one of the 80 who won't make it.
You didn't think about that at all, that you were taking a spot away from a youngster then?
No, I mean, if I felt that way, I'd go right down to my neighborhood bank and tell the banker he had to get out now because I was ready to be president. He'd been president for 15 years, and it's time for me. I mean, we might as well do that with all our jobs, right? We've been doing this long enough. Why don't you give a chance to this 19-year-old kid, your cameraman here? He'd like to be a sportscaster, too. I mean, if you don't do it in other walks of life, why should you do it in baseball? Certainly the most competitive of all occupations.
Okay, from what I've heard and read about you this year, you seem to have more realistically are looking to the major leagues than you did last year. What brought it together? What made you really think that you possibly could get back?
Well, I haven't felt from the beginning that I really had a good shot at coming back to the big leagues. I mean, I think I have as much potential as anybody else, but if I thought making the big leagues was the only satisfaction I'd get out of this, I certainly wouldn't do it for that. I mean, I think as time goes by and I relearn this pitch more and more and get back in it, I'm going to get closer and closer to the big leagues, just like these kids are improving every day, and some of them are going to get closer to it.
Was there any one thing that you said to Ted Turner that you think might have convinced him to give you another shot?
Yeah, I think I had a great spring, but they released me anyway, and then I had to talk him into giving me another chance, and I told him basically that I was a winner. I was a hard-working, intelligent guy, and the things I've gotten in my life so far had been successful, not because of luck, but through hard work and staying with it, and that he ought to bet on me as a person, and that I was like he was, a winner, and I want him to buy me as a person. And he said, okay, I'm buying you. Picked up his phone, called his general manager and said, find a place for this man, he's no dummy. And the place they found for me was actually pitching batting practice in Richmond, waiting for an opportunity to come along. And then when the Braves came by for an exhibition game, and I beat them, in effect. I left the ball game leading 3-1 in the 7th, having struck out 7 guys, and I mean, that's what earned me a chance with Savannah.
He said, I want your purse. And I know that people say, well, just give it to them, but for some reason, that's just not your natural reaction. Plus, I had this firewood, so he hit me on this shoulder, and I guess that forced this loose, and he picked up a piece of the firewood and came down across the top of my head and took my purse, and he ran down this way, and blood was just gushing out of my head, and I was scared to death. And I really, right at first, didn't know exactly what to do. Fortunately, it did not knock me out. And my neighbor across the street said I have very healthy lungs, because I screamed. And I ran out into this corner in the opposite direction from him, toward the street light. And I saw a car drive off about that time. I don't know whether somebody was waiting for him or not.
What has been the effect on your life in this house since that incident and since the other burglaries and purse snatchings?
Well, right at first, I really was just almost terrified to do anything. I have gotten better because, of course, you've got to keep on living. But I do live alone, and I work, and I know in the wintertime it's dark when I get off from work. I do shop well. I have always shopped. When I go out at night, if I'm going to be after dark, I usually get someone to follow me home if I'm by myself. My friends have been very gracious about, offering to pick me up for different things. If for any reason I know I'll be all by myself, I call my neighbors and let them know, and they usually will come out on the porch and turn the light on and see that I'm in. I am a lot more careful about locking my car, about letting people kind of know my coming and goings. That's one thing we in the neighborhood have gotten to where we kind of report to each other. I think everybody feels good that the police have moved into the area, and in my own opinion, I sort of feel like we've got our priorities kind of mixed up. There's been a good bit, to do over innocent people being stopped by the police, but at the same time, what about innocent people who've been hit in the head or had their houses broken into? And I do want to tell you that when I bought this house, one of the main reasons I did was because this was just a quiet, tranquil, middle-class neighborhood, and I don't know, I just think it's a shame people own their homes here, they vote, they're just decent folks. And you don't see as many people out walking, and if you do see people walking, they're usually in a group.
One of the crime deterrents used by police in the Cloverdale situation is the police canine squad. The unit has 6 dogs, 4 of them working on patrol, 2 used for tracking work. The unit is part of the strike force, the special unit used in high crime areas. So far, 3 burglars have been captured through the use of the dogs. They were being used on the Cloverdale detail on the day we shot this story.
The dog you just saw has made 3 catches with burglars. He successfully apprehended them. The other dogs have not yet. This is the most experienced dog we have, Bo, about 4 years old. He's probably the best and most intelligent dog. They're all good dogs. They haven't had an opportunity yet to catch a burglar, mainly because, for whatever reason, they get there too late, or the burglar is wise and gives up. We've had several occasions where the burglar, upon hearing that a dog was being put in the building, would come out voluntarily, saving himself either a bite or, at most, a good run.
Does this, in turn, save the possibility of an officer being injured in a shootout?
Yes, sir, very definitely. I would sacrifice that dog in a minute if I thought a man had a gun rather than send an officer in and lose his life. We can always train another dog, but it's very expensive to train and get another man.
What kind of training do these dogs undergo? Are they trained when you get them?
No, sir. They have no training when we get them. We have to train them in obedience, and from obedience they graduate into attack, and from that into command. See, these are basically command dogs. They only attack on command of the handler, whereas an attack dog, if you let him out of the vehicle, he'll attack whoever is around close to him. He just hits anything that moves. A command dog, you can send him on an attack, and you can call him back before he hits. By command, he'll turn his head away before he'll bite. And this makes a much better dog because that gives you the choice of either hitting the man or calling him off if it turns out that the man's innocent, you know, or trying to give up. Saves wear and tear on the man.
We look for, in all the dogs, to have a good aggression, but they are command dogs. They are not attack dogs, and they just have to do the job real well. And I think it's a highly specialized field, and it's proved to do pretty good so far, and we want to do a lot better.
How much time do you spend with Bo here?
Nothing less than 8 hours of the day, sometimes more.
Black people seem to think that these police dogs are trained to attack black folks.
That's not true. The dog is trained. As a matter of fact, all of our agitators are other handlers. Unfortunately, we don't have any black handlers right now because none of them are volunteer for the unit.
This is a voluntary unit?
Strictly voluntary, yes, sir. And they're trained against white agitators. They don't make any distinction between who they hit. It's whoever you put him on. I can point him at that man and say, stop him, and he'll hit that man. I can put him on you and say, stop him, he'll hit you. It doesn't make any difference to the dog.
Police hope the use of the squad will help curb the high crime problem in Cloverdale. Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News.
After 7 years of controversy and 3 years of vacancy, the 184-unit complex will finally be demolished. Following fruitless efforts by the Montgomery Housing Authority, Mayor Emery Former decided the city should step in and try to resolve the problem.
We're delighted that Mrs. Harris has agreed to let us go ahead and rid the city of this unsafe and unhealthy condition we have in the city. So we're just delighted and hope that they'll move with dispatch to get it done.
Does this move kill your resolution that you plan to introduce tonight?
Well, the resolution that we have, of course, was done at the request of the Housing Authority in an effort to force HUD to either go ahead and do it or allow the city under its police powers to do it. We will keep our powder dry and be ready to act with this resolution if in fact they drag their feet on tearing it down, but I think that they will act in good faith and go ahead and see that it is done with speed and dispatch. That's what I'm hoping for anyhow.
Representative Alvin Holmes says his actions against Secretary Harris's decision to freeze demolitions nationwide played a decisive role in the action.
And of course, the reason this happened, I understand that Emery Former is saying, the mayor of the city of Montgomery, that, you know, he's responsible for this. The reason Patricia Harris made this decision because it was about to embarrass President Carter with the blacks in the state of Alabama and nationwide. As you know, our protests received national publicity in regards to Patricia Harris' position on Jackson Heights and other things here in the state of Alabama pertaining to HUD.
Meanwhile, John Wilson, new director of the HUD area office in Birmingham, today said approval for the demolition was based, as far as he knows, on the analysis of the Housing Authority request by the HUD office in Washington some 3 weeks ago, and at that point, joint recommendations were made. Wilson added he hasn't talked with anyone outside HUD or Housing Authority channels. Jackson Heights housing project is finally coming down. But regardless to who's responsible, the Montgomery City Housing Authority, the City of Montgomery, or Representative Alvin Holmes, the end result is glorious enough for all to share. Janet May, WSFA TV News.